Everybody, Madison here with Health by Ratio, and welcome to video number 2 in our 3-part series all about how to get back to running after an injury in just 15 minutes a day. Now, I'm really excited to transition into some really unique and key ways to mobilize the body so that we can get into the better ranges of motion that allow us to move the ways that we can stay stable and healthy for decades to come. But first, just a reminder of who my team and I consist of. We are licensed physical therapists, corrective exercise specialists, running coaches, and functional health coaches that work online to create customized and holistic programs for our clients to get them out of recurring, random, chronic tweaks, injuries, pains, whatever it is they're dealing with, and bridge that gap towards not just their health goals, but allow them to get back to living the abundant and fit lives that they desire and giving them the tools to do that for decades to come. So we, like I said, are going to transition to the mobility techniques needed based off of what we did in video number 1. So if you missed that first video, please go back and check that out. The assessments there are going to point us to what specific tissues we need to mobilize to improve our joints ranges of motion. And then video number 3 is going to take us into how to now use these ranges of motion correctly again. So that's where we're at right now. And this second step, guys, was so eye-opening for me because there's a couple of rules of thumb in some of these. We're going to be using a foam roller. Most of us have a foam roller. A water bottle can also work. A wine bottle could work too. You might want to put a towel around that to give yourself a little bit of padding. And potentially you'll need a ball for some of the areas that you're working on. This is just a lacrosse ball, but you could use a golf ball, a tennis ball, baseball, something along those lines will be great. Now, if you have, if you don't have access to those things, your hands can work. We're going to be doing like deep tissue massage work, so you technically can use your hands as well. Or a massage gun can also be a good alternative that are pretty popular nowadays. So if you have one of those, that can be handy as well. And these things were so eye-opening for me because I didn't realize how many tissues I had that were gunky in my body, that were sticky, that didn't have really good ranges of motion. No wonder I had a barrage of injuries for 8 years all over my body in random spots, because the rule of thumb is if you apply normal pressure to any soft tissue in the body, there shouldn't be pain associated to it. It should just feel comfortable. So like if you're getting a massage into your shoulders, it shouldn't hurt in theory. But if you were like me, all over my body, like I couldn't push on one section of this thing without it hurting. If I laid on a foam roller anywhere, every spot of my body hurt like crazy. Well, as I freed this thing up, I released tensions, I reduced my pain, and I increased my ranges of motion beyond anything I was ever able to do before. Clients like Murit, she's a competitive marathoner who was training to qualify for the Boston Marathon. And we worked with her, got her moving in great full ranges of stable motion. It corrected issues that she was having at her hip and her back as well as her knee, and got her feeling incredibly healthy around it. She PR'd in her marathons, qualified for the Boston Marathon, and then we actually connected with her a few months later, actually, because she, unfortunately, and this happens every once in a while, she dropped the ball. She didn't end up staying on top of her necessary mobility work to keep the body pliable the way that, and maintain the way that she had cultivated with us. And so something got over irritated. It wasn't like a rolled ankle, but like all of a sudden her ankle started inflaming and getting really irritated, and she wasn't able to run. She got really nervous that she was going to have to skip her Boston Marathon. Well, we got her back on a holistic schedule to mobilize her key areas around her ankles and her knees and her hips. She wasn't having much stuff up else above the waist that was an issue at this point, but we got her working on the key areas around the lower half of her body, and literally within a couple of weeks she was back to running again. It made that big of a difference that fast. When we can release these tensions, we can break up this gunk, we can restore proper blood flow to the tissues, then this thing can start healing miraculously fast. So without further ado, let's transition to these key mobility techniques to move us back toward full ranges of stable motion. So I'm going to break down first just where we would need to release around the ankles, around the hips, around the thoracic spine. You might not need to work through all of these, but have your PDF handy, your checklist handy, so that you know, okay, it's my left ankle, or I notated my hips, or I notated my thoracic spine, whatever it is. And then I'm going to do just a quick run through of how to get into all the main important tissues around these joints so that we can restore our range of motion back. And then I'm going to actually do an example release for you guys that most of us are probably going to have some good gunk around this particular muscle. And I'm going to teach you guys some unique ways to actually truly get some deep tissue release and range of motion back. So the first quick run through, if you notated your ankles in any way, shape, or form in that squat assessment, the areas that we're going to key in on are 3 spots. One is the bottom of the foot. This is where a ball is amazing to work through, and I actually recommend just sitting on a chair and placing your foot right underneath, right on top of that ball. The next area is going to be the calf, and this can be done with a foam roller or a ball, getting our actual calf muscle released out. And then the final area is going to be the interior tib right here, the front of shin muscle, the meat on the side of the shin, and we can again use that ball and work into this. Now, any of these areas you can also just work in with your own hands, your own fingers. You can dig into this stuff like a massage therapist. You can also do this with a massage gun if you want to mobilize it that way. But just using these pieces of equipment, since most of us have these things lying around the house, is a great starting point as well. Now, if you notated the hips, there are plenty of tissues that can be worked around the hips. But for the recommendations to get us rolling is going to be 1, the quads. And the quads can be done with a foam roller, laying down on your stomach, and you can work anywhere from the knee all the way to the hip. Again, I will talk to you guys about how to specifically release these in a second, but you have free range on anywhere from hip to knee, and we can pivot our leg to one side and work more of the inside aspect of that leg, the adductors. We can be straight on with the top of the quad, or we can turn our leg the other way and work more the lateral aspect right next to the IT band. We're not literally on the IT band sideways. We're more at a 45-degree angle so that we're on the quad itself. So that can be fair game. I would not, guys, recommend releasing the IT band itself, even though that is a really common one that a lot of us have a lot of tightness on. The IT band is the densest line of fascia in the body. It's a big freaking cable of fascia. Fascia is the connective tissue that runs from head to toe. It's the second densest substance in the body next to bone. It's really tough and stubborn stuff. If you don't know what fascia is, you've seen it if you've ever cut into like a raw piece of chicken or steak and you pulled it apart and see the like white webbing that's attached all throughout it. That's what fascia is. Well, the IT band is just a cable of fascia, and it's really tough. And so the ways to actually create slack to the cable is by releasing the tissues around it. So that's the quads, which we just talked about. That's the calves below it. That's the next area we're going to talk about, which is the outside of the hip, which is considered the TFL. This is the meat that's right on the front 45-degree corner of the hip, and that wraps towards the side of the hip, towards the hip bone. That can be worked with a foam roller or a ball, where we're laying on our side right on the meat of that hip bone, wherever we got guncle on there. Or we can get more acute with a ball in that region and get nice and deep into that hurt so good area. So that's above the IT band that makes a difference. And part 2 of the hip release area that we might need to be working on. And then part 3 is going to be the glute complex around anywhere along the glutes. So we can be, and this can be done with a ball or a foam roller, where we grab a seat on that ball or foam roller. We can just lean to one glute and figure out our hot spot, or we can cross ourselves into a figure 4 and get even deeper into this region. If you notice in general that you feel like you got some really tight hamstrings, another go-to You can use a ball to get into the hamstring itself. I recommend that you sit on something for it because the positioning, if your leg is straight out in front of you, the hamstring's more taut and you won't be able to get as deep. But if you kind of get your sit yourself on something firm and put a ball underneath that hamstring, we can apply that pressure and dig into that region. So those are all fair game around the hips. There's some other nitty gritty areas like the psoas that we can get into, but they're a little bit tricky to do and something that I think need a more thorough explanation than a quick run through like I'm talking about just now. And then lastly is the thoracic spine. If you are dealing with the thoracic spine, the areas that we're going to work through is one going to be the lats, the muscle that runs along from the armpit down the kind of backside of the ribs. This is where a foam roller is phenomenal to get into that region. We're going to work on the chest itself. So this is anywhere, the meat just below the collarbone. You can take a ball and lay on your stomach and get yourself into a position where you can get into any hurt so good gunk here. And then the last area that we can work through the main key area is going to be in between the shoulder blades. And again, we can get a ball and just lay down on the back. If you have two trigger point balls, two tennis balls, you can put them together in a sock or tape them together, or you can get something like I have here, which is a peanut. So you could just put these in two individual balls into a sock and stick them together this way. But this is shaped like a peanut and it fits on both sides of my spine, and I can lay down and work into the in between the shoulder blades on both sides of the back at the same time. So that's another alternative. So, but those are the three areas that we would explore around the thoracic spine. Okay, so now we have the potential go-tos. Now I'm going to give an example of how to do one of these releases, and I'm going to do this on my calves right now, guys, because many of us have some good gunk to work through in our calves. So I think for most of us, this is going to be a focus point for you. But even if you don't have to work on your calves, or obviously you're going to have other areas of the body, there's probably going to be another 6 to 12 areas that you need to work on pretty regularly. It's the same rule of thumb for all of these. The rule of thumb is we are going to spend about 10 minutes or so, and we're going to try to release one area, one piece of gunk per area per day. That's it. So if I have the bottoms of my feet, I have my calves, and I got the front of my shin, I'm going to pick one spot on each of these three areas, and that's the only thing I'm going to try to release that one day. What I'm not going to do is roll up and down the whole calf for 30 seconds to a minute and call it a day. That's like taking my fingers and just skimming them across the surface of the water without actually getting the deep tissue stuff to release. So I'm going to take my jackhammer tools out, and I'm going to bust up this tissue. I'm going to really work on this dense fascia and cause it to finally, like when we first get onto this, we're giving ourselves a deep tissue massage. And it should feel that hurt so good pain, like if someone was digging an elbow into our upper traps, like when that masseuse is rubbing their forearm into us. That hurts so good, 8 out of 10 on the Richter scale of pain, we're going to work it. And we're going to keep mobilizing it until that thing, it might take a minute, it might take 5 minutes. But at some point, that thing is going to go, it's going to relax a little. You'll probably still feel it, probably still feel some soreness, but it might go from an 8 to a 6 or a 4 or a 2, or it might go completely away. But at some point, it's going to relax a little bit. It's going to be less painful. Once that happens, once it adjusts, move on to the next side or move on to the next spot of the body. Just do as many as you can in that 10 minutes. So how we would implement this, we're going to use the calf as an example, but this can be applicable to any of the tissues you need to work through. We're going to explore the region with our foam roller, trigger point ball, or whatever. I can work on the lateral aspect of this calf with my foot turned out to the side. I can turn it vertically and work directly behind the calf, or I can turn the foot inward and work on the inside edge of the calf. For many of us, it's going to be this lateral section, 45-degree corner that's going to be gnarly. For me, I got a spot about right here that I could work through. Now, for some of us, just that weight is plenty. Otherwise, if it's not intense enough, feel free to cross the other leg over and get a little bit of extra weight. Other than that, I'm just sitting on the ground and relaxing. From here, the first thing, always we start with a couple of deep belly breaths, deep diaphragmatic breaths, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Just breathing through the belly a few times relaxes the nervous system a little bit. It already gets it ready to calm down. Then what we're going to do is we're going to start doing some contractions, relaxations, and some massaging, some scrubbing into the area. So how this is going to work is we're going to take a deep breath in and fill up our lungs with oxygen, and we're going to hold it for 5 seconds. While I'm holding it for 5 seconds, I'm going to tighten the muscle that I'm trying to release. So I'm going to engage my calf. So I'm just going to kind of flex that muscle. Now, when I do that, I want to ease my pressure up off of the foam roller or off of the ball, or like relax my hand if I was doing this as a self massage. But I want to take less pressure for that 5 seconds. I'm pumping blood to the area because that's what happens when you contract it. Then I'm going to exhale and I'm going to melt into this thing. And that's when I'll apply back my pressure. So we're going to take a deep breath in. Tighten it for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, melt into it, relax. And now I'm going to start kind of rocking the body up and down on it. I'm also going to start kind of scrubbing side to side into it. I'm going to do maybe some ankle circles or toe points and toe pulls. I'm just kind of moving the tissue. I'm creating friction into it, and I'm creating blood flow to this area just for 15 to 20 seconds. Then rinse and repeat. Deep breath in. Tighten it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale. Melt into this bad boy. Start scrubbing into it. Working that tissue out. Think of yourself as the massage therapist breaking up this gunk. And then rinse and repeat. And at some point, there's going to be a point where you're going to get into that tightening, that deep contraction, and then you'll relax. And you'll be like, oh, that's not so painful anymore. That's the moment we're looking for. Once it feels less painful, move on to the next side or move on to the next tissue on your checklist for that day. That's it. Apply that to every area of your body, guys. Deep belly breathing, contractions and relaxations, and then scrubbing into the area and moving the body into it. What that does is it creates friction and pumps blood to the area to a point where this tissue is going to end up breaking down. It's going to tear a little bit, just like if you were working, doing a bunch of push-ups and you broke down your chest and your shoulders and you got them sore. So the next couple of days, what happens? Body is sending a whole ton of blood flow to that area because that has the nutrients that allows that damaged tissue to repair. Well, we just took this sticky, dense, gunked up fascial tissue, we busted it up, and then all of a sudden we're pumping blood to the area to heal it, and in the same time, we are rehydrating it. We're getting it more pliable. And now we can actually do some stretching. We can do some dynamic stretching here and pull this thing open. Go into PNF stretching and pull this thing open. There's a variety of different stretch techniques, but whatever we release, whether it's ankles, hips, our thoracic spine, we can now do stretches to the feet and ankles, to the hips, to the thoracic spine, and it's actually going to pull open. The illustration of this that I love is from Katie Bowman. She is a famous biomechanist, and she talks about when you stretch out pliable tissue, like gliding tissue the way that it should. It's like having a cotton shirt, pulling on it, and it has a certain amount of elasticity. But when you have gunked up tissue, either fascial tissues that are cemented together, maybe fascia's knotted up, maybe it's grown together like scar tissue from an old injury, and it's bound together. That's fascia. Scar tissue is fascia that just grew together that way. Well, then what we are doing when we stretch it is it's like taking that shirt and putting on swabs of paint and letting the paint dry onto the fabric. And then we try to stretch it. Well, now the areas that are painted down, gunked up, those areas of the shirt aren't going to expand. The rest of the fabric has to overstretch. So we don't actually get improvements to the restrictions that are really impacting us. Well, what we just did was we found a paint swab on our tissues, and we took our jackhammer tools out, we busted it up, and now we can actually get some expansion from that thing and help it improve. Now, a couple of quick rules of thumb with regards to self-massage, guys. So rule number 1 is if it feels sketchy, it's sketchy. Reposition yourself, meaning move that ball 1 inch up or 1 inch down or 1 inch to the left or 1 inch to the right. Reposition that foam roller one way or another and get it to a more comfortable position. If you feel a nerve sensation, like it's zinging up and down, okay, that means we got to reposition. That's no bueno. Or if it's so excruciatingly painful, oh my gosh, like it's at a 9 or a 10 out of 10, I can barely breathe here. Okay, we got to either ease up off of it or we need to modify. We need to do something more gentle to that area with like our own hands or something so that we're not putting so much pressure and we can actually tolerate the pressure and relax into it a little bit. And the last rule of thumb is if you just worked out this area, like the day before, let's say you did a workout, you went for a walk or a run, or you did lifted weights or whatever, and your tissue is sore, don't do a bunch of foam rolling and trigger pointing to that tissue. Work something else because that tissue is already damaged and broken down. You don't want to beat it up more. Or if you did a ton of foam rolling and trigger pointing to your calves yesterday and that tissue is all beat up in that specific spot, don't work that specific spot. Work the next thing on your list, or work a different area. Move it up an inch or move it down an inch and work something new. Don't work the same area within 24 hours because you can then just kind of keep beating it up. It would be like getting a deep tissue shoulder massage every day of the week. That would beat it up and piss it off. Just like if you did a ton of push-ups every day, you would just be building soreness on soreness on soreness. So cycle through your important tissues every day for about 10 minutes and then spend 5 minutes doing some dynamic stretches to that area and pull those tissues open. So that's the secret in terms of really restoring pliability, where people have seen themselves go from never being able to squat with their feet straight to all of a sudden they can squat with their feet straight. Never being able to cross their legs when they sit on the ground to all of a sudden being able to cross their legs when they sit on the ground. To always having tight shoulders and always forward when they're at their computers to suddenly not feeling like they're playing tug of war with their body and it's natural for them to have good posture. So that's all secret number 2 in this. And now we are going to be transitioning to video number 3, where we've started to cultivate these ranges of motion. Now it's time to teach the body how to use them correctly. So I'm pumped for that. We'll see you guys in the next video. Let us know in the comments what areas were really tight for you. Was that calf gnarly? Did you also have that outside of your calf like I did? Was that your spot that you needed to work through? Or did you find something else that was that was the hurt so good spot? Or we got multiple? Let us know. We can't wait to hear. Talk soon.